Hello, friends. I hope you guys have had a wonderful day so far. And today we're going to be talking about carbohydrates. And so, carbohydrates, the basic thing that we need to know about carbohydrates is right up top of this PowerPoint right now. Is carbohydrates serve as fuel and building material in cells. They're most famous in you as being fuel. You're going to use sugar to create energy in your bodies and cellular respiration. But we also use it sometimes as building material, and definitely other organisms do for sure. We typically just use carbohydrates though as fuel. You also see in just the name carbohydrates, I always like to point this out. Latin is super important. The word carbo is Latin for carbon. So carbo, carbon. And then hydrates is the Latin word or Latin combination for water, like hydro. Okay, so carbohydrates means carbon water. And if you actually look at a breakdown of, I'll go to the next slide really quick, look at the breakdown of just what a basic form of a carbohydrate looks like, it always follows this pattern. 1 C, 2 H's, 1 oxygen. Typically, that's what it follows. And so looking here, it's a carbon and a water. Carbohydrates, carbohydrate. And you can see in the glucose, see it follows that same pattern. 6 carbons, so therefore there has to be 6 oxygens, and because there's always twice as many hydrogens, there's 12 hydrogens. So going back, the simplest form of carbohydrates are monosaccharides. That means that they're just monomers. They're by themselves. They're called single sugars. The most famous one is glucose, but there's other ones, and we'll take a look at it in a second. But for the most part, we're going to be talking about glucose when we're building things. And the carbohydrates then come together from monosaccharides and those monomers and make polysaccharides, which are many monomers connected together. Or there's actually even polysaccharides that are just 2 monomers connected together, and those are called disaccharides. And we'll look at those too. So we'll take a combination of everything, and hopefully you understand at the end. So monosaccharides, like I said, follow the formula CH2O, or carbohydrates. Glucose is the most famous one. You guys know that. C6H12O6. That's the one that we use the most. Monosaccharides are classified by where they have their carbonyl group. You guys learned about that in functional groups. The most famous functional carbonyl group is ketose. And then the number of carbons in each carbon skeleton. So how long that carbon skeleton is kind of tells us how big the monomer is going to be. So these are the most famous of the monomers. Sorry, I got distracted by my flip-flop. And you can kind of see that each one of these is slightly different. It has a lot to do with where you have these functional groups and what side these functional groups are on. You can see this one is just literally the flip here of where the OH is. You also see, okay, these guys down here don't have that ketone kind of coming off, those that are the aldose, we can call it, and it has a ketone during the middle of the actual sugar. And so each one's a little bit different. Probably the most famous 2 that you've seen here before is probably glucose, obviously, fructose. You probably have heard of ribose because you were talking about RNA, ribonucleic acid, and then deoxyribonucleic acid is DNA. So that's a lack of an oxygen when the oxygen is taken off, and deoxyribose. And so these are all very important, but we're really going to focus on this guy, maybe low fructose. On a side note, fructose is made mostly, we find it mostly in fruit. That's why it's called fructose. But it's very addicting to humans. Humans like crave it evolutionary wise because that was one of the better sources, was to eat fruit to get energy, to get these sugars. And so we naturally crave it now. And a lot of companies have actually used that to their advantage by pumping their products either full of fructose, like with cane sugar and other sugars like that, or they do high fructose corn syrup is another thing you've heard of before. And high fructose corn syrup is extremely bad for you, and it causes a lot of problems to your health. But once you get it, you crave it, and you can actually become addicted to high fructose corn syrup. And some of you guys might be addicted to high fructose corn syrup and just don't know. So looking here, we can have monomers. We can show them in either rings or in line formats. They usually form rings when they go into water, aqueous formations. We can also draw them as ring or lines. Typically in biology, everything's in water, so you're going to see a lot of ring structures, being honest with you. A disaccharide is when we connect two of these guys together, and their combination between them is called a glycosidic linkage. Sorry, I can't say that word. Glycosidic linkage, and that's, you're going to see what that is in a second. It's just a covalent bond between the two. They basically just like hold hands with each other, and so again, it's just a typical dehydration synthesis where you lose a water and you connect together with this oxygen in the middle. So here I have a glucose, and I connect them together and I make a maltose. Maltose is most famous for being in malts. If you've ever had a chocolate malt, you've had maltose before. It's a little bit different tasting. It's not as, I would say, it hits a little bit different. In your body, you almost instantly break down maltose into glucose, so it doesn't really matter much, but on your tongue, it does. Maltose does hit your taste buds a little bit different. If you connect a glucose with a fructose, you get the other famous sugar that you've probably heard of before, or one of the ones you've heard before, and that's sucrose. Sucrose is a glucose and fructose connected together. Again, those combinations, sucrose is usually not as sweet tasting to us as these two, but it's still a popular sugar supplement. I don't have a picture of it, which is really highly disappointing. But lactose is also a sugar that we need to know here. It's also a disaccharide, and we have to break that lactose down in our stomachs when you have dairy. So dairy has lactose in it, and if you're lactose intolerant, what it's saying is you don't have the enzyme to actually break down that disaccharide down into its monomer formations. And so therefore your body doesn't know what to do with that lactose, and so therefore you have one of two choices, and that's either go back up or go back down. And so what people now do, what we do is we give them things like Lactaid. Lactaid is literally just the enzyme in powder form, goes in your stomach and separates out the lactose from each other, and it's something you can actually use. So lactase is the enzyme inside your stomach you're supposed to be able to make. Some people just can't. One of the reasons why is us actually, drinking cow's milk is more of a new adaptation past, milk in general, we really only had for young ages. So this is a new adaptation in the last 10,000 years to be able to drink cow's milk. And it's something that we've taken advantage of because cow's milk, just like breast milk in humans, is a high source of a lot of different nutrients and vitamins. And we've learned how to take that dairy product and make a lot of different delicious things like cheese and whatnot. So obviously, it's an evolutionary thing. It's quite interesting. Polysaccharides are sugars that are longer than really two. Could be anything from 3 to thousands. And so there's some really famous ones that I'd like us to know. Starch being one of the first ones. Starch is found in plants. It is the way that they store sugar. And so they're storing sugar in this formation. We don't use starch. We don't make starch in our bodies. Plants do. You actually like the taste of starch. You guys probably taste something that was too starchy, but you do like the taste of starch. And what's interesting is we have a starch inside of our body that we do make, and we have a different name for it. And so starch is a plant polysaccharide. Ours is called glycogen. So we store glucose as glycogen in our muscles and in our liver and a couple of different places. And we store it, and we are waiting for us to break it back down into glucose to do cellular respiration. So one, if you're looking at starch, you can see it's probably a little bit more organized than our version. Either the amylose, which is the technical term for starch, or the amylopectin, and then we have glycogen on our side. So theoretically, I mean, that's the big difference, is that they're just combined differently. Ours is a little bit more messy. Theirs is a little more straightforward. That's about it. Next, we have, so glycogen, talked about that. It's our storage. Sorry, I just got a beep. I thought someone, okay, it's an email. I thought someone joined the Google Meet as I was recording. Glycogen is mainly in the liver and muscle cells. If you don't use glycogen within 24 hours, you do the conversion in your liver cells to fat. And that's how you gain weight. So you eat something really sugary, say, I go eat 12 donuts from Pickwick, and I don't use all that energy and I don't break it down as calories in the day, then my body will turn it right away, probably in the first couple of hours, to glycogen as storage, waiting. And after 24, 36 hours, it's like, I don't think he's ever going to use this. And it turns it into a lipid for storage for later use. Obviously, most of us don't want later use lipids hanging around, but that's our diets now. Next, we have cellulose. So cellulose is also another famous plant polysaccharide. It's only found in plants, but they use cellulose as a complex starch to build cell walls. Cellulose is very, 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 very strong. We can go into the technical stuff. The book does a little bit here. It goes into it, but we're not going to go into it that much in this lecture. The idea is that cellulose is a combination of different starch chains that create a strong structure that, one, gives the plant cell protection, but two, it's hard for living things to break down. And cellulose is the most abundant organic molecule that's made by a living thing on Earth. There's more cellulose than almost anything else. I mean, the number is insane. I mean, think of all the grass. Every one of their cells is covered in cellulose on the outside. And because of how it layers itself, cellulose is super strong. We actually use the same kind of structure or layering for bulletproof vests. And so it's something that we learn from nature. Now, what's also interesting about cellulose, the more interesting thing for me to talk about, is that we can't break it down as humans. We don't have the enzymes to actually break down their linkages. And so we're stuck with cellulose. And when you eat cellulose, your body just passes it through. And most carnivores and most omnivores are like that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, like your dog, when it eats grass, it's more likely to either trying to throw up or pass something, a bowel movement. Or one of the reasons why if you eat a lot of salad, all of a sudden your body usually has you pass a bowel movement pretty quick. Your body just can't pass it down. Now, we actually have a name for it. We don't like to call it cellulose in food. We always like to change our names of food items so we don't really think of what we're actually eating. That's why we, call pigs pork and stuff like that. We call it fiber. And so you've heard of fiber before. Things that have high fiber, you pass, pretty quickly. Now, to actually break it down, there are certain kind of bacteria and protists that actually break down the cellulose. And it actually is a quite fascinating thing. And this is actually a lab the school won't let me do. And, I don't know if it's for good reason, but we'll say it's for good reason, is the termite lab. So most of the major herbivores you think of, they have bacteria and protists in their stomach that help break down the cellulose. They're actually not doing the work. So like a cow has 4 stomachs. It chews, swallows. The first stomach starts breaking down the linkages. Then it throws up its food again, chews it again, goes to a different stomach. It starts breaking down again, and there it keeps going. But like in termites, so termites are famous for eating wood. This is the lab, is you get termites as a science teacher, and as science students, what we do is we take the termite and we take a little knife and get a microscope, little dissecting microscope, and we cut open its stomach and its guts spill out everywhere. And you look into the guts of the termite and you will actually find that what eats the wood is the protists that live inside the stomach of the termite. And so the termite actually doesn't digest cellulose. It's the protists. The protists turn the cellulose into something useful for the termite. And the protists live there because it's a safe environment. It thinks that it gets food, and it does get food, and it's a safe environment. It's a good place to live. It's its own little world in there. And so it's a symbiotic relationship between these two. The school let me do it because they think I'll lose the termites, or termites will escape and start eating all the wood in the school. Fair enough. Chitin. Chitin is a polymer that is found in animals and funguses. It's kind of like our cellulose in the animal kingdom and fungus kingdom, and we use it a lot for exoskeletons and insects. We also use chitin now a ton in surgical equipment, which is kind of ironic. We use chitin to make really, really strong and organic surgical thread that kind of dissolves over time and breaks down. And so what is kind of interesting, especially with now like the new thread, is say like I get a cut on my arm and I need stitches. They can use chitin thread, and they know that there's actually bacteria that live on your skin that can break down the chitin, that is healthy for you. It's not a problem for you, and it'll actually slowly break it down, which is kind of a weird idea that we're using the bacteria on our skin. So that's what we're going to cover for carbohydrates. The main things, these are all different kinds of carbohydrates, but we have to know that they are used for fuel in plants and animals and all living things, and they are used as building materials in plants and animals. Not so much us, but chitin is used in insects and some other animals, and in plants they use cellulose, which is a huge deal for them. And so that's the building material for them. So carbohydrates, carbo water, can be used as fuel, can be used as building material. There's monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. Hope this made sense. If you need any help, let me know. Have a fantastic day.